Today's daf is Tzadi, and we're starting on this number 90. We're going to start on Tzadi Amud Aleph, first line. Ba'e Rami Bar Chama, Shete Amot Bagag, Shete Amot Ba'amud Mahu. So he says, carrying 2 amot on the roof and 2 amot on the amud, on a pillar, what's the status of it? So this is very vague. So Amar Rabba says, Mai Kami Bayale, what is he asking? Karmelit v'reshut hayachid kami baile. Is he asking, if you have a karmelit, you have a place where it's prohibited rabbinically to carry more than or up to 4 amot, and that's what the gag is, and he wants to carry 2 amot in that area and then move it over to an amud. The amud is actually a reshut hayachid because it's 10 tefachim in height and it's 4 by 4 tefachim in its dimensions. So if that's what he's asking, how's that a question? In other words, it's a rhetorical response. He's saying, is that really the question? Whether you're allowed to go from a karmelit to a reshut hayachid? We know you can't do that. Rami Bar Chama agav churfei lo iyen ba. Rami Bar Chama, because he's so sharp, he wasn't careful about the way that he expressed his question. In other words, he wasn't precise. He didn't express himself clearly because he's so sharp. He understood it without having to express it so clearly. But really, this is what he really meant to ask. Bet amot bagago bet amot b'achsadra ma'u. What if you have 2 amot on the roof and 2 amot in the achsadra? The achsadra is sometimes called the portico. What it means is basically this 4 pillars or however many pillars with a roof over the top, but there are no walls to it. So this area of an achsadra is adjacent to the roof. So you could walk from the roof, let's say, of your house onto the roof of this achsadra directly. Okay, now Rashi explains, Shel ba'alim achirim al gabe tikra shel achsadra yoter mi betzatayim ve'en la mechitza. So what he says is that we're talking about a case where you have your roof of your house, and right next to the roof of your house is this achsadra that belongs to somebody else. Okay? Now, on top of the achsadra is more than a betzatayim. It has more than 5,000 square amot, and it has no walls on top, obviously. Okay? And what it says, the question is that it's also a karmelit. Now, why is it a karmelit? Because we have a general rule of what's called a karpaf. A karpaf requires 2 things. It's a certain size, it's 5,000 square amot, and it's not hukaf ladira. It's not walled for the purposes of living inside. So the achsadra, like a piece of land. Usually it's a piece of land, like a field. Here it's not a piece of land. Here it's this achsadra. Nobody lives in achsadra, and it doesn't have any walls anyway. It just has a roof. So you're on top of this achsadra. This achsadra, if it had less than the dimensions of a karpaf. In other words, if it had only 1,000 square amot instead of 5,000, so then we would say the fact that it has less than the requisite amount. We would consider maybe the roof to be like walls, just like we said yesterday. The roof can be seen, like the edge of the roof goes up to the sky. Fine, we could say that perhaps if it were a smaller area. But since the area is 5,000 amot, and even a field that's 5,000 amot, if it's enclosed with a fence, it's still karmelit, because it's too large for the walls to make it into a private domain. So too here. This achsadra is so large that it can't be a private domain, and it's too big. And even if you look at the roof as a walled area, it's still going to be too large for it to be considered reshut hayachid. So therefore it's a karmelit, just like a field that's 5,000 square amot that's enclosed would be a karmelit. And you're going from the roof of the house, okay, that is according to this interpretation a karmelit also. We're assuming it's a karmelit too. And you're going from the roof of the house over to the achsadra, over to the roof of the achsadra. So the question is, what is the status of this case? So the Gemara says, Mahu, what is the status? You want to carry 2 amot on the gag and 2 amot on the achsadra. So 2 amot. Now the gag is the roof. According to Rav, is considered like a karmelit. I don't know if they have a picture of it. Do they? Yeah. Oh, that's it. Yeah. So. Yeah. Yeah, so you're standing on the roof, okay. The edge of the roof. This is number 319. So you're standing on the edge of the roof, right. And you walk just 2 amot over here and 2 amot over here. So you only walked 4 amot. Now you're not allowed to carry up to 4 amot on your roof because, according to Rav, we're assuming that this roof is a Carmelit. Okay?
What do we do here?
You just wanted to move something from here to onto here. Let's say it was putting too much pressure on the roof or something like that. You wanted to move it from here over to here. So the question is, can you cross over, since they're both Carmelit? This is a Carmelit, because let's say it's a roof over multiple dirot, it's over multiple houses, whatever it is. So you can't move on it, and you want to move it over to here. So you're moving less than 4 amot in total. You're moving from... and he says Shabena Gagin, that you're moving from this multi-ownership roof. So what we said before, Rav said you can only move it less than 4 amot. You want to move it 2 amot on the roof, and you want to move it 2 amot onto the next one. So you're only dealing with Carmelit, and you're dealing with under 4 amot, or you're dealing with, let's say, 4 amot, exactly 4 amot. The question is, can you do it since you're crossing over? So the Gemara says, do we say that since neither one of them is really chazel ladira, neither one of them is really considered a dwelling place, because obviously the top of this roof is not really a place for dwelling, and the achsadra is obviously not a place for dwelling, so therefore it's all one big Carmelit? Or do we say, or maybe since going from one roof to another, as we said before, from a roof owned by one person to a roof owned by another person is going to be a problem, so to here we say going from this roof to this achsadra is going to be a problem, because remember, they're owned by different people. Okay, so now we look at what Rashi says. He says, do we treat it as one reshut, chadar reshutahu, va'afal pi she'enan shel ish echad, even though they don't belong to one person, okay, that still, ein b'hem chiluk reshuta, they're not distinguished. Vafilu l'rabanan delo damu l'shnei gagin, okay, but even according to the rabbis, because it's not like 2 roofs, the hatam ikad diurin lemata b'shnehem, because when you have 2 roofs, and the Chachamim say you can't go from one to the other. Why is that? Because there's a dwelling place under roof number 1, and there's a dwelling place under roof number 2. But here there's a dwelling place over roof number 1, but under roof number 2 is achsadra. It's just a portico. There's no dwelling place. So even though it's owned by somebody else, it doesn't really have any dwelling underneath. So v'yesh lomar kishev sheyesh chiluk reshut lemata babatim kach yesh chiluk lemala chaluk lemata. Right? So he says the chiluk lemata salik vazil. That you could say that just like there's a distinction below it, it rises up. So in other words, the question is like this: all we have here is a distinction between the roof that is on top of a house and the roof that's on top of an achsadra, and they're owned by 2 different people. Okay, but ownership alone, the question really is ownership alone enough? Because yes, the roof over the house is owned by, let's say, a different person than whoever owns the roof that's over the achsadra, but the achsadra is not a dwelling. So it's not a dwelling, it's not a place where people live.
The roof is not dwelling either.
But it's over a house. So in other words, what's below is a house. Right, so maybe we'll say, okay, the reason why when there's 2 roofs next to each other, we say you can't cross from one to the other because they're owned by different people and the different people live inside. Here,
it can be the next roof. It can be maybe a garage, a storage.
Yeah, it could be something else. Storage could be a karpaf also. Right, exactly. That's the question.
Rashi is saying ain't chiluk. There's no difference between you can't.
According to side number 1, there's no distinction
between the 2 of them.
No, he doesn't mean that. He means there's no conceptual difference. In other words, if you had another dira right next door and it was owned by somebody else, there for sure the Chachamim would say you can't cross over. But even though it's owned by somebody else here, since it's not a house, they're saying, okay, there's only one house here. Okay, so that's side number 1. Or do we say that no? Since you're crossing over, in other words, since you can't cross over from house to house when they're owned by different people, you also can't cross from house to achsadra when they're owned by different people. That's the question that's the question. Okay? So now Rav Bevai Bar Abaye asked, Bet amot b'gaga bet amot b'churba. Mao. So he says, what about carrying 2 amot on the roof and 2 amot in the churba, in a ruined area? Okay, and again, it belongs to somebody else, and it's open to the Reshut HaRabim. So the roof that you're on, which is let's say accessible to multiple people, is a Carmelit because it's accessible to multiple people, like we said yesterday. And now you're going though onto a churba. You're going onto a ruin that's owned by somebody else. So again, we have the same kind of question, it would seem, because where you are is on top of a dira. It's on top of a place that people live. What he owns is not a place that people actually live right now. So it should be a similar question. So Amar Rav Kahana, Lav Hainu Rami Bar Chama. Isn't this the same question as Rami Bar Chama? Because Rami Bar Chama asked, can you go from a roof that is really, that is already a Carmelit because it's open to multiple access? So can you go from there to an Achsadra that's owned by somebody else? We already asked that question. And the question was, since the Achsadra is not actually a dwelling, should it be okay? So you're asking the same thing. Can you go to a Churba? It's not a dwelling. Amar Rav Bevai Bar Abaye says, V'chimechar atay v'nitzai achsadra lo chazel l'dira. So he says to him, V'chimeacher atay v'nitzai. Are you telling me that I'm getting my material from other people? Right? But Rashi says, are you telling me, Mipi acher bati v'chilakti b'she'ela she'ela. He says, she'ela acher bati lekanter. So he says, are you telling me that I came with somebody else's question to cause trouble? Right? In other words, I'm taking the she'ela of somebody else to raise it again in a different form. He says, no, I'm not coming to cause trouble here. My question is worse. Why? Because here the churba was a dwelling place. Now, if it's a dwelling place, so why is it a question then? He's asking a further question. So the question that he wanted to add was like this. Maybe you'll tell me you can carry from the roof that's over the houses or the apartments to a roof that's over the Achsadra. Why? Because the Achsadra is not a dwelling place. And a Churba, maybe you'll tell me, is a dwelling place. Right? Because it was formerly a dwelling place. Or maybe you'll tell me that since the Churba doesn't have anyone dwelling in it now, because it's an abandoned building, maybe it would be okay. So the question is, what's the limit? Do we say that a dwelling place is defined as what it was made for? And so in the case of the Achsadra, it was never made for somebody to dwell there. It's an open area. But a Churba was made for somebody to dwell there. It's just abandoned. It's ruined. It's broken down. So we say that, but it is a dwelling place. So you wouldn't be able to carry even 2 amot on your roof and then 2 amot on the roof of this ruin. Or do we say no? Since the ruin doesn't have any dwellers right now, it's abandoned right now, in actuality there's nobody living there, so therefore actually you could carry 2 amot on your roof and 2 amot on top of the churba, because the fact that it's owned by somebody else, the reality is that nobody lives in there. And since nobody lives in there, we treat it the same as the Achsadra. Perhaps we should. So he says, we don't know the answer. Now let's go back to the cases we had before. If you have Gagina Shavin, according to Rabbi Meir, Gagina Shavin means you have roofs that are on an equal plane with one another, on an even plane with one another, or Gag Yachidi l'Rabanan, or you have a Gag Yachidi, you have a single roof according to the rabbis. Now before, what was the case we were dealing with? We were dealing with the case of multiple roofs according to the rabbis. Multiple roofs according to the rabbis. That was where before we had a question. If you have multiple roofs according to the rabbis, you can't cross from one roof to another. But there was a machloket between Rav and Shmuel. What can you do on your roof? What are you allowed to do on your roof? And Rav said you can only carry Daled Amot even on your own roof because it's open to the other roof. And Shmuel said no, on your own roof, even if you have 2 roofs that are right next to each other, on your own roof, you're allowed to carry as much as you want. That was the machloket we learned yesterday. Okay, when they're adjacent to each other and they're butting up against each other, right? That was the machloket. So, but now we're talking about Gagina Shavin the Rabbi Meir. According to Rabbi Meir, you're allowed to go from roof to roof. Okay, and according to the Chachamim, on your own roof, the question is by itself, a roof totally by itself, they should have the same status. Because according to Rabbi Meir, you're allowed to go from roof to roof owned by different people. And according to the Chachamim, when your house is separate from the other houses, and we're just talking about on your roof, what's the status? So now we have what seems to be a contradiction, because Rav Amar mutar metaltel b'kulo, because now Rav says you can carry on the entire thing. Ushmuel Amar en metaltelin bo ala b'dalet, and according to Shmuel, you can only carry 4 amot. So what is this talking about here? So according to Rav, so Rav said before the opposite of what he says now. that you can carry on the entirety of this area. So that means, according to Rabbi Meir, even if you have 10 roofs and they're all in a row, owned by different people, you can carry from roof to roof to roof to roof to roof, no problem according to Rav. And if you have your own roof, no matter how large it is, you can carry up there according to Rav. According to Shmuel, you cannot carry as far as you want, according to Rabbi Meir. When Rabbi Meir said that you could carry from roof to roof, he meant what we were saying before. You could move something 2 amot on your roof and 2 amot into the next roof. In other words, you can still only move things a total of 4 amot. The chidush was you could move from one roof to another, even though they're owned by different people. But you can't actually carry any further than 4 amot up there, according to Shmuel's interpretation of Rabbi Meir. So this is the opposite of what they said before, because before, when they were talking about the 2 roofs that were up against each other, Rav was the one that said on your own roof you can only carry Daled Amot, and according to Shmuel you can carry in the whole area. So of your own roof, you can carry in the whole area. So what's going on here? Why now is he changing? So first we say Kashed de Rav de Rav. This is a contradiction between Rav and Rav, because over there with the case where you have 2 buildings up against each other, he said even on your own roof you can't carry more than Daled Amot. Why? Because you might carry over to the other one. So here he's saying you can carry as far as you want. So why is that? So Hatam lo min kara mechitzta, acham min kara mechitzta. Because what was the issue over there? The issue over there was that since these 2 buildings are flush up against each other, the middle wall is not discernible. So even though Rav believes that walls number 1, 2, and 3 extend up to the shamayim, they extend up to the heavens, and therefore you're enclosed on 3 sides. On the 4th side, there's no clear mechitza, and therefore you're wide open to the other roof, and you're not allowed to carry to the other roof according to the Rabbanan. So therefore, you're not allowed to carry at all, more than 4 amot. That's the limit. Whereas here, what are we talking about? Min kara mechitzta. Here we're either talking, according to Rabbi Meir, about a place where you're jumping from roof to roof anyway, so that's certainly okay. Or we're talking about a case where it's your own personal roof, even if it's very large. And since it's your own personal roof that's not adjacent to any other roof, the walls go up to the shamayim on all 4 sides, and you should be totally fine. Okay, so that's the way that Rav resolves the issue. There's a long Rashi here, but so he says that it's all that it's all one. So in the case of so Rashi says that Rav said before. Okay, we said that already. Is there anything we're missing from the Rashi here? So he says that even according to Rabbi Meir, we understand that Rabbi Meir doesn't prohibit a person from going from one roof to the other one. Okay? But still, why aren't you concerned since it doesn't have mechitzot, right? So he's telling you that I do believe that the walls can be looked at as mechitzot if the houses are separate from one another. In other words, if you can see the edge on all 4 sides, it's not flush with any other wall, with any other house. So in other words, from before we might have thought that he's not going to allow you to extend that side up to the shamayim. He's saying no, if the buildings are separate from one another and there's space where you can see the edge of the buildings in between, then we will say that the wall does go up to the sky and each roof is a distinct area, and we don't care that each house is surrounded by the Reshut HaRabim. You could still jump over it to the next one. Okay, that's the way that Rav says. Now, what about Shmuel? Kashed de Shmuel de Shmuel. So, because over there Shmuel said, when we talked before about 2 houses that are up against each other, Shmuel had said that you can carry in your own roof as much as you want. And here he's telling me that I'm not allowed to. So, the difference is because over there we were talking about a case where your roof did not have more than 5,000 square. It didn't have up to 5,000 square amot. So therefore, we're extending the walls on all 4 sides up to the heavens. That was the difference between Rav and Shmuel. Rav said we can't do it in that case. Shmuel says we can do it in that case. But once you've extended the walls on all 4 sides, you have a different issue, which is what is the status of what's inside those walls. So Shmuel is saying that when we were talking before, we were talking about a roof that was smaller. It wasn't 5,000 amot. So therefore, since it was enclosed by walls, what do we say? Even a field that's enclosed by walls, if it's less than 5,000 square amot, is fine to carry in. But here we're talking about a roof that's so large that even if it's enclosed by walls, it's still a karpaf. It's still a karmelit, and therefore you can't carry inside of it. Okay, so that's why he says, "V'hanei mechitzot lemata avidan, lemala lo avidan." והווה כקרפף יתר מבית סתיים שלא הוקף לדירה וכל קרפף יותר מבית סתיים שלא הוקף לדירה אין מטלטלין בו אלת בדלת. So basically what Shmuel concludes is like this: yes, we extend the walls upward from the walls below, but the only problem is those walls. So you might say, well, a karpaf is defined as a place that's enclosed not for residential purposes, like a park, like a field. Here, isn't it enclosed for residential purposes? Because it's the building that people are living inside. So we should look at whatever's on top of the roof as also enclosed for residential purposes. So there Shmuel says no. Even though we extend the physical walls, so to speak, to surround this area, we don't pretend that the top of the roof is for ladira, that it's ukaf ladira. Because really, the enclosure for dwelling is only the building below. The building on top is just enclosed for recreation or for other things. So we're not going to extend the residential status to the top. And what that means is, since it's not a residential status on top, therefore it's like a park or it's like a field on top. So it can only be enclosed, the enclosure will only help us up to 5,000 square amot. That's bit satayim. Okay, so that's the way that Shmuel looks at it. Rav is saying, no, we're going to extend not only the walls, but also the status to the top. And therefore say that you can carry even on a very large roof. If it's one roof, and it's set, and it's one building of one person, one owner, then it's no problem to carry on that roof, because you can see the edge of the entire perimeter, and below is a residential area, so on top is also a residential area. Shmuel says, even if the two things abut one another, you can still imagine it as enclosed, but only up to 5,000 square amot, because we view it as a karpaf. We view it as enclosed, but not enclosed for dira. That's the machloket between Rav and Shmuel. Okay, so that's why they differ in their interpretation of each case. Because in the previous case, where you had two houses that were up against each other, Shmuel was more lenient about letting the walls rise up, even though there was no clear edge between the two roofs. Whereas Rav, it was stringent. Where here, though, there's separate roofs, so that's not an issue for Rav. The issue is, do we look at the rooftop as residential? There, Shmuel's saying, no, only the downstairs is residential. This is not residential. So we're not gonna extend the status of residence here. So that's why there's a distinction between the two. So now the next case, Itmar was stated, Sefina, a boat. Rav Amar Mutar Taltel Kula. We learned about this before. Rav says you can carry through the entire boat. You're on a cruise ship. According to Rav, you got no problem. Shmuel Amar you're not going to have very much fun on the cruise, according to Shmuel, if you go on a cruise, because you cannot carry a cruise. A ship is a karmelit, according to Shmuel. Why? Rav Amar Mutar Taltel Kula. So Rav says you can carry through the entire thing. Why? It's got walls. What's the problem? It's got walls, and you live inside the boat, right? So it's ukaf ladira. So even though it's larger than 5,000 square amot, or it's 5,000 square amot or larger, it's a bit satayim, still, it's enclosed for people to live inside. Ushmuel amar in metaltalin barba amot, but Shmuel comes along and says, no, you can't carry more than, you can only carry up to 4 amot. Why? Mechitzot leavriach mayim asuyot. Because those walls are not really to make a residence. Those walls are to hold the water out. They're to hold water out.
And when you walk around, you're walking on the gog.
Right, you're walking. Right. Like when you walk on the deck, yeah.
Yeah, when you walk on the decks, you're walking on the roofs of all the apartments.
Right, and they're not hukaf l'dirat, for sure. That's a good point. Now, but he's talking about even the walls themselves are really just to keep the water out. So the Gemara says, Amar le Rav Chia bar Yosef l'Shmuel. Rav Chia bar Yosef said to Shmuel, Hilchita kevatach or hilchita kerav? Does the halacha follow your position or Rav's position? Amar le hilchita kerav. The law follows Rav's position, and most of the Mefarshim seem to interpret this as that Shmuel retracted his view, and eventually said, no, you're right, Rav. The walls of a boat are really to enclose the inside; they're not to keep the water out only. So Amar Rav Gidal, Amar Rav Chia Bar Yosef. Rav Gidal said that Rav Chia Bar Yosef says, Rav Shim kafa al pia shed metaltalin ba ele be'arba amot. That if you turned a boat upside down and you walked on the underside of the boat, in other words, now it's over, and you're walking on the underside of the boat is now a roof, right? You turned it upside down, so that it looks like a coconut. You cut a coconut in half, you put it like that. Mm-hmm. Now you walk on the top. Now you're walking on the roof. The roof that you're walking on is really the underside of the boat because you turned the boat upside down. So there, Rav agrees you can only carry Dalet Amot. So the question is, Kaf Alemai, what did you turn it over for? If you turned it over because you want to live underneath there, that's the same case as where you have a dwelling place underneath. Because he says that you extend the status of whatever's underneath to the roof. And since whatever's underneath is a dwelling, the roof should also be a dwelling, and so therefore the underside of the boat, which is now the roof, should also be a dwelling. It's talking about where you turned it over in order to do work on the boat. You wanted to retard the boat. So you retard the boat, you turned it upside down, and you're walking on. You want to walk on and carry stuff on the underside of the boat, which is now on top. Right, because you turned it upside down. So there, since you're not using what's underneath, in other words, you're not going to live underneath the boat because you're not. The boat is turned over not because people want to live inside the turned over boat, but because they're doing some work on the boat. So that's why. So therefore, it doesn't change the status of it to a dwelling. It doesn't make the roof into a dwelling. Rav Ashi matnela asifina. So Rav Ashi had this whole discussion between Rav and Shmuel as with regard to a boat. But Rav Achab, that actually Rav Achab, the son of Rava, applied this machloket of Rav and Shmuel to the case of Achsadra. The Itmar, as it was stated, Achsadra b'bik'ah. Rav amar mutar b'kula, Shmuel amar ein mitatlin ba'il be'arba. So here we have what's called an Achsadra. We said before is this sort of an open thing. So it has 4 pillars. There are no walls. It just has a roof. So the question is, what is the status of this? Is it a Carmelit or is it a Reshut Yachid? Now, why is this an issue? It's an issue because normally these porticos were up against a building. They were like a porch of a building. They were like the outside area of a building. So you would have a regular building and you would have this portico, which was a roofed area, almost like your front porch, a roofed area, but without any walls. Okay, for you to sit out there. But now we're talking about Achsadra Babik'ah. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's in a valley. So it's in the middle of a field. So there's nothing around it. It's just 4 pillars and a roof. So the question is, what about, if you're under there, are you under a Reshut Yachid, or is it a Carmelit? Because a Bik'ah is generally a Carmelit, because it's not a place that's a public thoroughfare. It's just an open area. So Rav Amar Mutar Letaltel Bikula, why is that? Because Amrinan Pitikra Yored Visotem, because we have a general principle, that the edge of the roof goes down and seals it off. Ushmuel amar in metatlin ba'ila ba'arba lo amrinan pi tikra yored v'sotem. So what Rav says and Shmuel say, according to Rashi, the issue is that normally this portico is up against a building. So since there's at least one real wall, because one side of it is the wall of the building, so therefore we can say that the edge of the roof on the other 3 walls will come down and seal it off. But now we're in the middle of a valley, there's nothing around, there's just 4 pillars and a roof on top. So here, according to Rashi's interpretation, Rav says you can still say that the edge of the roof comes down on all 4 sides and it's sealed. So if you're underneath the roof, you're surrounded by 4 walls. And according to Shmuel, no. Since there's not even one real wall, we don't look at it as walls at all. That's the machloket. And according to this, in other words, we said before that Rav Achab Reid Rava said that the case in which Shmuel eventually admitted to Rav, retracted his position and admitted to Rav, wasn't the case of the boat, but was the case of the Achsadra. So that was why they bring this case here. Now, V'Rav Alibad Rabbi Meir. Let's go back to these 2 questions. Now remember, we have basically 3 categories of places. We have our private domains. Well, obviously, we have certain places that are categorized as private domains. We have our Carmelit, which is, there are multiple forms of that. We have the Karpaf. Now, the Karpaf can either be a Carmelit if it is larger than a Betzatayim, even though it's enclosed. If it's a Betzatayim or more, it's going to be a Carmelit. If it's less than that, it's going to be a Reshut Yachid. So we're dealing with, and then you have a chatzer. You have your courtyard. So we're going to see that what they're dealing with is the interrelation among these. So Rav is Alibad Rabbi Meir. So Rav's interpretation of Rabbi Meir was that if there are multiple roofs in a row, you can go from roof to roof to roof. You can carry along the entire thing as the roofs are separate from one another. In other words, there's an edge in between them, and you can go from roof to roof to roof, jumping from roof to roof to roof, and it's no problem. Okay, that's the situation that Rav is saying according to Rebbe Meir. So if that's the case, litaltale migag lechatzer. Why can't you take things from the roof to the chatzer, to the courtyard? Now remember, we're talking about where there's no Eruvei Chatzerot here. But let's say I left something on the roof. Why can't I carry from there to the Chatzer? Since according to Rebbe Meir, all these different places should really be in the same category. They're all considered enclosed. The roofs are all considered enclosed, and they're all considered one reshut. The Chatzer is enclosed. It's all considered one reshut. Why can't I know I can't carry from inside my house to the Chatzer because we didn't make an Eruvei Chatzerot. But why can't I carry from the roof to the Chatzer? Why should it be a problem according to Rebbe Meir? Since they're all Reshut Yachid, they're all considered enclosed. So the answer, and they're all considered Hukaf Ladira. The Chatzer is considered enclosed for residential purposes, and so is the roof, according to Rav. So he says, Gezerah Mishum de Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi. This is what we learned yesterday, that according to Rebbe Meir, there's a separate Gezerah, that you can never go from a Reshut Yachid that's 10 Tfachim higher to a Reshut Yachid that's 10 Tfachim lower, or vice versa. If there's a pillar of 10 Tfachim in the middle of a Reshut Yachid, and that pillar would by itself have the dimensions of a Reshut Yachid, you can't take something from the ground of the Reshut Yachid and put it on it. If you're on a roof that's more than 10 Tfachim above, obviously, the floor or the ground of the courtyard, you can't take something from there to a Reshut Yachid that's lower. What's the concern? The concern is that if you do that, then you might take something from the ground of Reshut Harabim and put it on a pillar in the middle of Reshut Harabim. That was the Gezerah of Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Ushmuel ali b'derabanan. Now let's go to Shmuel according to the rabbis. Shmuel according to the rabbis says, what was the case according to the rabbis? According to Shmuel ali b'derabanan, that we were dealing with a case of a roof owned by one person that's larger than Bet Satayim. Okay, so since it's larger than Bet Satayim, even though we look at that roof as enclosed, it's enclosed not for residential purposes, because the roof is not part of the residential status. So according to him, though, nitaltel migag lekarpaf. So why can't we carry, let's say you have your house. You're on the roof of your house, and it's a very large roof. It's 5,000 square amot. Right adjacent to your roof is a karpaf that's also 5,000 amot in dimension. Why can't I carry from one to the other? I'm carrying from, in other words, I know I can't carry 4 amot in these areas because they're a karmelit, but if I were to move an object that's on the edge of my roof right into the karpaf, what am I doing? I'm moving it less than 4 amot from karpaf to karpaf. It's no problem. It's all the same. It should be the same status. So the answer is, Amar Rava bar Ulag, Zera Shema Yifachet Agag. The problem is maybe the dimensions of my roof are going to be diminished. I'm not going to realize it. Somehow they're going to waste away. It's going to waste away and it's going to be smaller. Let's say it was exactly 5,000 square amot and it's going to become smaller than that. And I'm not going to realize it. And what happens when my roof becomes less than 5,000 square amot? What happens according to Shmuel? Now it's a Reshut Yachid, because it doesn't have that large size anymore. And I'm going to be carrying from my Reshut Yachid now into this karpaf, and I'm not going to realize it. So then the Gemara says, Ihachi, if that's true, mi karpaf lekarpaf nami lo yitaltel. Then if that's the case, why can you carry from one karpaf to another? And everybody seems to agree you can carry from one karpaf to another. In other words, you can't carry 4 amot in a given karpaf, but you could carry something from one karpaf to another. If it's going less than 4 amot, it's not a problem. So why are you allowed to do that? Why are we not worried? So why are we not worried that the karpaf is going to be diminished in size also? And it's going to end up being less than 5,000 square amot. And if it's less than 5,000 square amot in one of them, that means one of them became a Reshut Yachid by accident. And now you're carrying from a Reshut Yachid to a karpaf by accident. Why aren't we worried about that? The answer is because when it comes to the karpaf, if it became smaller, we would notice. Because the walls, the enclosure is very discernible. So for it to become smaller, the enclosure would have to be moved. Actually be moved in. Whereas here, but here we're talking about the building simply wasting away. Erosion of the building. Erosion of the building you're not going to notice. But moving of walls you're going to notice. Okay, so therefore we're not worried about the karpaf wasting away. We're worrying about the roof wasting away. Amar Rav Yehuda says, "Kishetim salamar l'divrei Meir gagin reshut latzman, chatzirot reshut latzman, karpefot reshut latzman. L'divrei Chachamim gagin v'chatzirot reshut achat, karpefot reshut achat hen. L'divrei Rabbi Shimon kulan reshut achat hen." So basically, a summary of the positions of everybody. So Rav Yehuda says, if you analyze everyone's position, you will find the following conclusions. And remember our 3 different categories. We have a category called Gagim, roofs. You have a category chatzerot, that's courtyards, and you have a category karpefot. So according to Rabbi Meir, gagin are one reshut. In other words, roofs are one status, one category. So that's why you're allowed to carry, according to Rabbi Meir, from one chatzer from one gag to another, from one roof to another, even though the roofs, one roof is owned, as Rashi says, by Reuven, and one is owned by Shimon. It doesn't matter. They're all, that we don't care that there are diurin chalukin lemata. We don't care that there are distinct dwellings below. All gagim are one status. And chatzerot are one reshut to themselves, meaning that you can carry from your chatzer to the next chatzer, not from your house into your chatzer into the next chatzer, but from one chatzer to another. Even though from chatzero shel Reuven to chatzero shel Shimon, you can take something that was from the beginning of Shabbat was in one chatzer and move it to another one, because all chatzerot are the same. And karpefot are reshut latzman, which means if you have two karpefot right next to one another, you can move from one karpaf to another karpaf, no problem, because all karpefot are considered the same status. Now Rashi explains in the long Rashi we're going to get to in 1 second, but now we say l'divrei chachamim gagin v'chatzerot reshut achat. The rabbis say that gagin and chatzerot, in other words, Rabbi Meir says that each one of these categories is distinct, but you can't carry, let's say, from gag to chatzer, from roof to courtyard. You can't carry from chatzer to karpaf. You can only carry within the species, from one gag to another, even though there are distinct owners. So basically, if you were to summarize Rabbi Meir, he only cares about the category of enclosure. He doesn't care about the number of owners. So you're transferring from roof to roof to roof. As long as you're in the category of roof, he doesn't care, even though the owners are different. When it comes to karpaf, from karpaf to karpaf to karpaf, no problem. Just as long as the owners could be different, he doesn't care about that. Now, according to the Chachamim, gagin and chatzerot are one reshut, karpefot are another reshut. Meaning that you can carry from a gag to a gag. You can carry from a gag to a karpaf. That's not a problem, according to the Chachamim. Okay, from a gag to a karpaf is no problem. So Rashi says he says that not that you can carry from one roof to another if they have different owners, because we know that that's not true. The rabbis actually extend the status of the house below to the roof above. So that means you can't actually carry from roof to roof that are owned by different people. Okay, but what you can do is, let's say you just had a chatzer, from a chatzer to a chatzer, or from a gag to a chatzer, if you had a gag that was shared by everybody. Okay, in other words, you had a gag, you had a communally owned shared roof and a communally owned shared place. So shared chatzer. So he says, even though the gag is my personal gag and the chatzer is owned by multiple people, still I can carry from my gag to my chatzer. So that's what Rashi says in the Rashi there. He says that aval mechatzer shel rabim lechatzer shel rabim metaltalin. So you can go from one chatzer to another, just like Rabbi Meir says. Umigag lechatzer de rabim metaltalin va'afal gav de gag reshut didei v'chatzer de shutafut. Even though we're saying that the gag is owned by, and even though there's no eruvei chatzerot, that's the chidush. In other words, I left something on my roof, which is my personal roof. Now, if there's no eruvei chatzerot, I can't carry from my house into the chatzer. I cannot. But I can carry from my roof to the chatzer. That's what the rabbis are saying. Okay, even though my roof is my personal roof, and the chatzer is owned by everybody, it's no problem. I can't carry from roof to roof owned by different people, though. I can carry from my roof into the chatzer, according to the rabbis, and I can carry from chatzer to chatzer, according to the rabbis. But I can't carry from a roof or a chatzer into a karpaf. That I cannot do. So Rashi says, karpefot reshutacha, that the karpefot are their own category of afilu hein shel shnaim. So according to the rabbis, you can carry from karpaf to karpaf, even if they're owned by different people. But you can't carry from a chatzer to a karpaf, even if they're owned by the same person. Okay, and he explains why. Because since gag and chatzer are the same type of usage, so therefore, because they're both dwelling a type of dwelling, that's one thing. But to carry from my chatzer, which is a type of dwelling, to a karpaf, which is not a type of dwelling, I'm not allowed to do. Okay, so that's the way that the rabbis understand it. So that's why they say gag and chatzer are one category, and and karpaf is another category. According to Rabbi Shimon, everything is one category. So don't think that Rabbi Shimon is distinguishing between the categories. He says, you know what? Really, all of these different things are one. You can carry from a gag to a chatzer, you can carry from a gag to a gag, you can carry from a chatzer to a chatzer, you can carry from a karpaf to a chatzer. These are all non-houses. Okay? Basically the way that Rabbi Shimon looks at it is, we just look at, is it a house or not? If it's not a house, it's an enclosure that's not a house, they're all the same. It could be a roof, it could be a chatzer, you can carry from one to the other, you can go back and forth, it doesn't matter. And that's why he's not concerned about carrying from one roof to another. He's not concerned about carrying from one chatzer to another, and so on and so forth. So according to the rabbis, so basically the question is, how do we summarize this? According to Rabbi Meir, you have three categories. Within the categories, you can go from one to the other, but you can't cross categories. According to the Chachamim, you can cross categories from... Oh yeah, they have a little diagram there, yeah. According to the Chachamim, you can go from roofs to chatzerot, but you cannot go from a roof or a chatzer to a karpaf. And according to Rabbi Shimon, you can cross over all of them. Okay, now you have the separate argument between the Chachamim and Rabbi Meir. Yeah, so let's see that. Yeah,
here you cannot go from.
Let's see that. Yeah, so they show you there. That's according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that you can't cross from gag to chatzer, from roof to chatzer, or anything like that. But within roofs, even though the two roofs are owned by different people, we don't care that you're going from one to the other. It's no problem. The Chachamim care about that. They say you can't go from one roof to another if they're owned by different people. But you can go from roof to chatzer. You can go from your personal roof to the chatzer. But you can't go from either of them to a karpaf. And according to Rabbi Shimon, you can go wherever you want. There's no problem. Anything that's not considered as long as you don't take something from your house to any one of these places, you can carry from roof to chatzer, chatzer to roof, roof to roof, chatzer to chatzer, karpaf to karpaf, whatever you want to do, as long as there's nothing coming from your house into one of these areas and you don't have an eruvei chatzerot. So that's basically a summary, and tomorrow we'll continue, B'ezrat Hashem, where this will be substantiated with some additional sources.